Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. This morning, I am joined by Iain Calvert. Iain, welcome to the pod.
Pleasure to be here.
Excellent, mate. So Iain grew up in the UK and started his e-commerce journey in 2003. He moved to Brisbane in 2011 to join and eventually end up running one of Australia's largest independent e-commerce agencies, which, Iain, I think we met at a Google Partner Day many years ago.
We did indeed. It was great, wasn't it? They brought all these competing agencies together, all independent. We're all sat there going, all right, so this is our competition. But they did it really well because, I mean, the amount of people that I stay in touch with from that has been amazing. Everybody was just, I remember they said, don't share specifics, just talk general. So much value out of that. It was like, how do you do this? How do you,
By the end of the first morning, we're all sharing all of our inside trade tips. And
it's a small industry, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, everybody tends to get to know one another. People move from businesses to businesses, etc.
That's it. I think probably opened my eyes up to the value of you stand to gain a lot more by being open and sharing than you do from.
One of the fundamental lessons that I learned there. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm always open to chat to anybody about it. I'll tell anybody anything that I know.
Hence why we've got you on the pod.
Train me of the information. It just falls out of my mouth most of the time.
That's it. But yeah, in 2018, you took the leap to basically venture out on your own to become an independent e-commerce consultant. Over the years, you've worked with the likes of Billabong, Vogue, Quicksilver, and hundreds of others, which are mostly under NDA. You're currently an e-commerce advisory board member at Submarine by Disco Labs. You're also an advisory board member for UPay. So Iain, when I thought of e-commerce, I thought of you, and I thought the listeners to the pod, if they're working in an e-commerce environment, they're probably kind of looking at one business and one set of data and analytics and kind of one problem to solve. I think it's so valuable to hear from people that are looking at lots and lots of problems and lots of challenges and lots of businesses. And so I think so good to get you onto the pod. We're kind of getting close to 2023 now, and just, big picture trends, techniques, technologies, what you're seeing working in e-com, what the state of play is in Australia. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Good stuff. So I think probably after that introduction, listeners have a good idea of your journey. But just, I guess good to just, what are you working on at the moment? Types of clients, types of work.
So what I do is it's just me. And so I work hands-on literally with a handful of businesses. So I'm doing all the ads for them across multiple channels, helping them manage the business. Essentially, my whole thing is getting them to be cash flow positive. So it's managing the big costs, which in the e-commerce business are basically stock and advertising. They're the main things. So super involved with everything. I mean, just before this, I was just setting up some ads within Facebook and sort of particular ways. It's been a really interesting couple of years because obviously COVID, everybody's absolutely sort of crapping themselves. I remember sitting down with one client and we were doing essentially recession planning of what costs we cut and all these bits and pieces. And then 2 weeks later, so literally just saw it take off. It's like everybody turned their ad spend down. So all the CPMs came down, all those bits and pieces. And then, because I'm really close with the account, sort of saw that all the conversion rates were starting to go up and the CPMs were coming down. I'm like, I think we should give it the beans. Let's go. And just March 23rd, I think was the date, 2020, it just took off. Great. Obviously, a lot of other people sort of experienced that. And a couple of interesting things that I did with clients was that a lot of the time, the challenge isn't getting the sales. It's actually keeping up with the sales and keeping things growing consistently, because it's not a SaaS business where you can just sell, usernames and passwords. You've got to keep up with that sort of stock. So what I did with a lot of the businesses is we gradually increased it and we made sure we stayed in stock, which is now paying massive dividends, because what has then happened in Australia around, I'd probably say March or April, people started having a really, really tough time because the online sales started to come back. Everybody had real difficulty getting stock because the supply chain issues with freight forwarding, all the container costs, etc. They couldn't get stuff. So they just went, stuff it, let's order loads because things are going like this. Everybody ordered loads of stock. Less people started buying online because they wanted to get out. They wanted to book their European holiday where they could go lose their luggage, all those bits and pieces. and people were buying less online. So then what everybody did was they then started discounting, which made it even harder. And people have gone through a really, really tough time. It's kind of difficult to see. And I see a lot of people jumping around agencies going, oh, you know, you're not getting us the results, etc. It's like, well, e-commerce, like any business, isn't just the marketing. It's a combination of all these different sort of like factors. I think things it's really interesting seeing Australian businesses, say, compared to like UK ones. Like there's a lot of UK businesses that are really struggling. It's tough. Like, I mean, really, really tough. Doesn't matter what you do type thing. Yeah. Whereas Australia, I think there's a lot of chat that, hey, there's a problem, but I'm still seeing very consistent sales. September was a bit slow. Like I own an e-commerce business myself, and that actually like first couple of weeks, it was a bit like, whoop. I was like on holiday, trying not to do anything, but keeping an eye on it. And it's good. I think it's going to be really interesting, like October, November, December. I couldn't sort of like pick it. Every year, Black Friday seems to be bigger than like the previous one. So we'll see how we go. Add on top of all of that, all the iOS 14 fun stuff. So I think we all know those businesses that were just reliant on Facebook ads. And which that's so dangerous. So dangerous. I'm not saying this in hindsight. I'm just saying this, as you would know, being in the industry for ages, that I reckon it's about every 5 years there's this major upheaval. I remember when Google removed keyword data from SEO, and everybody's like, "Oh my god!" It's these things will continue to happen. I strongly believe that it's having a good diversification of all the different channels, because there's going to be a problem at one point if you're solely reliant on one, then you can kind of take a note.
That's it. And even if it's less macro and it's more just something happens to you within that channel, right? You need that.
I mean, we've all had Facebook accounts disabled for whatever reason, right? Because the wind's blowing in the wrong direction or have you, or, you know, you might have an issue with Google Shopping because the delivery information doesn't match up on the landing page what you're feeding because there's a technical sort of like issue, and you might lose that for like a couple of weeks. If you're reliant just on one channel, that's dangerous. I remember a friend back in the UK worked for this business that it was 80% of their traffic and sales was coming from SEO. Like, this is great, we're not paying for anything. And they said a little bit too close to the wind. I don't know exactly what they did, but they got a penalty, tanked, business wasn't run well, they didn't have loads of cash. 6 weeks they were done.
That's it. Definitely not what you want to be doing, putting all your eggs in one basket.
Oh my god, no, absolutely not. It's like, that's bad times.
100%.
That's like having an investment portfolio of like one stock.
Exactly.
It's not like in one.
Exactly. With in terms of ecom, what are you seeing in terms of verticals? Like, you know, the UK really struggling economic wise. In Australia, feels like it kind of probably validates what we've been seeing as well in terms of COVID. Everyone freaked out, but actually it turned out to be the biggest boom for e-commerce generally across most verticals we've ever seen. But then things have slowed down, probably because they kind of had to. So this unnatural spike, things are going to kind of come back to a norm, but also obviously there's strange economic times around the world, right? So are you seeing certain verticals or categories still doing really well and others struggling, or is that kind of across the board?
No, it's weird. It's sort of, it's the pattern I've spotted is more country based. I know there are some Australian brands sort of like really struggling. I do tend to notice fashion brands tend to only do well if they're on sale, which is like a vicious circle sort of like to get into. But if you're, I think to be honest, everything comes down to your product. If you've got a really good product that people want, that is fundamentally what's going to work, right? I think the people that got the massive boom in COVID because people could only order that product online have then seen it come off because people want to go and buy that sort of like elsewhere. So as much as I'd love to kind of give you an answer on the individual sort of like industries, no, it's honestly, it's more the setup of the business is the thing. It's what I found is the way to run an e-commerce business and the marketing for it is understanding what levers to pull. So imagine you've got like 100 levers, and then 10 of those levers are going to control that business. You don't know what those levers are until you start pulling them. So an example of pulling a lever is go, okay, do Pinterest ads, when we run them at X amount, generate more sales within the month? Let's pull that lever. Okay, that doesn't do anything. Right. Let's do some email marketing. Right. Does this sort of like, oh, right. Okay, that kind of like works. And the businesses that have got control on each of these levers that go, okay, cool. We know this is happening, so let's do this. Another example would be when to go on sale. I think most e-commerce businesses go on sale when everybody else goes on. Like there's an Easter sale or there's Black Friday or what have you. Whereas the best way to run an e-commerce/retail business is to go on sale when you haven't hit your numbers and you've got too much stock, because you want to turn that stock into cash. Whereas if you're constantly discounting, then that doesn't sort of like work. So that's a really good lever sort of like to pull. So the ones that I work with sort of hands-on, we've kind of got those levers and we go, okay, this has happened, we need to do this. This has happened, we need to do this. But I mean, I only work with a handful, so I'm really embedded within those. It's hard question to answer.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, I was kind of just curious as to, because obviously there's a reasonably diverse basket of clients, but I take your point that, it's a reasonably small sample compared to industry data that we can kind of grab. In terms of, I guess the bulk of the listeners to the pod are in-house Australian marketers. Presume those listening to this podcast interested in e-commerce or overseeing a business where e-commerce is an important part of what they're doing. So from what you're seeing and what you have seen over the years, like what is working in e-commerce at the moment? Like what are those? Because I think it's sometimes hard when you are siloed in-house. And you're working on one business. That's kind of why the agency model exists, right? Because you can use an agency to look at their insights and experience from a broad basket of clients. So what works, Iain? Give us the secret sauce.
It's actually really simple. Everybody tries to overcomplicate it. It's in marketing how we've kind of got sold this funnel and we sell that funnel sort of like onwards. I remember when I just started focusing on doing e-commerce, that I was like, set up all these funnels and right, okay, so these are ads running sort of like for engagement, and then we've got a mid-funnel here, and we've got all these sort of like bits and pieces, etc. I was like, it just never seemed to really sort of like work. I was like, well, but this should work. This is sort of like, this is like the playbook. And what I noticed was, particularly for e-commerce, let's say on Facebook, this is pre-iOS 14 and post-iOS 14. Essentially, you just run conversion ads. So we're telling Facebook, this is what we want. We want sales. We don't want people to click on the link or any of this bit nonsense. This is exactly what we want. And then using detailed audiences or interest audiences. So let's say if you're, selling keyboards, because there's one sort of like in front of me, people interested in keyboards, if there's an audience that big, that's probably a terrible example. At top of funnel, or sort of like cold audiences. And as long as you've got a pretty chunky size, so ideally Australia, it's sort of like 400,000 people plus of the actual audience. Overseas, it tends to be a bit sort of bigger, but you want a good kind of like mix of those.
Yeah.
Those things just perform amazingly well, like every single time. And I always go into any new account or business, and if they've normally got some weird sort of like setup where there's like engagement, traffic, or like I've seen people doing like Facebook leads for e-commerce businesses. You're like, how does that work? That's sort of, and so I'll watch them, and then I'll launch these detailed audiences, campaigns top funnel, and they just crash it every single time. And like the remarketing ones really, really struggle. I think that is very much like a post iOS 14 thing, because Facebook doesn't have that kind of like data. So it's you don't need to bother with all of these other different ones. And I hear these arguments where people say, oh yeah, but traffic campaigns are sort of like cheaper, or move up the funnel if it's sort of like not working, kind of do add to cart. And run these experiments for like a couple of months. Like, Facebook account managers like, oh yeah, try doing this, right? And when you zoom out and you look at the results, they're always worse. Always worse. And I'm measuring money in, money out. I'm not going on what Meta or Facebook ads manager is reporting to me. That is attribution, also known as a guess. It is such a guess.
So you're comfortable that Facebook reporting isn't accurate for what you need, and you're looking at
it's comical. I refer to it. So this is the way I explain it. I say, imagine it's like a lying toddler. Okay, it's kind of got a goodish intention, but really it's a general direction. Okay, unless the results are so good, that's when you know that something's really going well. It's an indication. What matters in e-commerce is money in, money out. How much money did we spend on advertising? What revenue did we get in over a given period of time? Now, depending on how much volume of traffic you get depends on that period of time. I would normally suggest a minimum of a month. So you see the money coming in, the money coming out. How's that doing year on year? What are the factors that could then affect that? Obviously COVID, etc., and stuff like that. It will become really, really, really clear. I mean, all you got to do is you just got to look at sort of like Facebook Ads Manager and that little 2 that sort of like comes up, goes, this is modeled. Okay, attribution is just a fancy word for guess. And the reason that they do that is because most marketing managers are looking for, well, we spent this, what did we get? And we all know that just simply doesn't work that way. Maybe for a few like impulse buy products, but there's no way you just do one search that happens. They're trying to go, right, this is the money you've put in, this is the money that you've got out. It's like, well, actually add together all those channels and you're not going to get like 100% of the revenue. You're going to get like 250% of the revenue.
Correct. Yeah, that's it.
So I have this theory of, because this is the thing, I was trying to work this out and I'm trying to do it sort of like for years. And I remember when I was leaving the UK, so it would have been like 2011, and Google Analytics was coming up with, we can do like multi-channel attribution. Got really excited because, you could see where everything sort of like was coming from. And I mean, that didn't really sort of like eventuate. And so then it was about 4 years back, I started looking at all this reporting. I was like, this doesn't make sense. And to me, when something doesn't add up, that's when the problem is. So all I do is I just zoom out to what we can trust, which is money in, money out. And then you go, okay, cool. So we increased our advertising on Meta for the last sort of like month, and we've had a significant increase in sales. We haven't gone on sale. There's been no other kind of like major sort of like event. So there's a high chance that it was that. So we can probably keep sort of like turning that up. And then what you do is you try and go down into a little bit more detail until things start getting fuzzy. And essentially you just simplify it. And this is what works for the brands that I then work with, because essentially you're turning ad spend up or you're turning it down. If you're getting a bad return, start turning it down, save your cash until things start going really, really well. Then you turn it up and give it a beat.
And then how you, does that just mean you having to be pretty judicious with introducing variations? Like you're not going to drop in 3 new channels in a month because you won't know which of those 3.
So what you do, so there's, I had a couple of experiences in my career, which, well, I suppose probably declared when I started, but it's always longer than I like to declare. And it purely by accident, right? So working for Billabong, we were selling £20 Billabong t-shirts, and Google Ads Manager was reporting that it was costing £15 per sale. And this is at the time where I just thought everything's like a line item, money in, out. And I was doing the SEO for the business at the time. I was doing all the marketing, and it was getting bigger and bigger. We were growing, so we got an agency in to do the SEO, kind of take it off my hands. However, the cost for that agency was quite a bit, but we said, well, let's just turn off the PPC ads because this isn't working. We're selling a t-shirt, a £20 t-shirt. It's costing us £15. The profit that we make on that, never mind everything else, does not cover it. Let's turn it off. Within 2 weeks, everything tanked. And it was like, and we were committed, I think, for about 3 months to this agency, or maybe 6 months. And it showed me the relationship between the different channels, and we all see it, right? If you spend more on Google Ads, then you'll have more direct traffic. When you send out big EDM campaigns, you see an increase in direct traffic. They all kind of work together. And that is the only way I have found that you can trust what works. So what you do is, instead of going like, hey, let's run a trial for a week, we go, okay, this month we are going to go, let's say, hard on Pinterest. We're going to spend, 10 grand on Pinterest. Are we getting an increase in sales? Are we making more? I don't care about their attribution, their 30-30-30 window by default, which always makes me chuckle. I know you can change it, but I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? And and oh, but you've had this many pins or this. It's like, okay, but did we make more sales? We're an e-commerce business, we're making more sales. That's what counts, right? That is fundamentally what a business owner and the person signing the checks for either your salary or to pay the agency cares about. So that's what you then have to get to. So you wouldn't introduce 3 new channels all at once. You go, right, let's do this one. And then you do these short tests and you know if it works or not. Again, it's pulling this lever, right? You go, right, let's pull this Pinterest lever. Does that work? That is doing nothing. Okay, cool. We can leave that alone. Right, we're doing email. Let's go and do this.
And how do you, because e-commerce here is dollar in, dollar out, and, you know, we're all in the business of making sales. How do you reconcile that with brand building and legitimate efforts online to build an e-commerce's longer term brand play?
Yeah, so what I do is I normally split a budget on if they're brand building, go, right, if this is 100% of our budget, we normally go 80% on the performance and 20% on the brand.
Yeah.
And that is, we don't care about the return that we are getting. It is purely, are we pushing a really good brand message? And again, it has to be a great brand message that's worth pushing. If you're selling like screws and there's no thought behind the brand, then don't be running like campaigns on like Facebook. Nobody wins sort of like that.
Yeah.
And a really interesting case study with one of the brands that I work with, they had gone way too hard on the performance stuff. They have this amazing brand. It's incredible. It's I can't tell you who it is because I'm going to tell you some details about it. But what they realized after we went in and started talking to them is like, I think you just need to get back to what you're really, really good at, and you need to be your voice. You don't need this massive team to produce X amount of ads. You know, we don't need to be doing like a social post sort of like every single day. Get back to the core of what your brand is about, and let's put 20% of the ad budget behind it to promote it and make sure that it's getting to the right people. Because I fundamentally believe the difference between a good e-commerce brand and a bad one is the brand. That becomes your defensible moat. That is why people sort of like buy, and you have to be unique in your approach to it rather than just selling sort of like widgets. Right? You look at some of the businesses that do incredibly well that you can think of that they mean something to you, and it's building that. So that's where I normally boil it down to the numbers. 80-20 split. That's
good. And I guess that's a starting point, right? There's probably businesses that probably don't need to spend the 20 as much, like to that level. There's probably ones that should be spending 30. And a lot of the work that we're doing, kind of lead generation, the longer buy cycle, not buying online, you're kind of often looking at a 50-50 split, or even 60 to brand, 40 to performance, just depending on
which makes sense, right? If it's a longer buying cycle, but with most e-commerce transactions, it's going to happen within 30 days.
Yeah. I'm glad you kind of outline that distinction, because I think that makes sense, right? That's right. What else? Like, what are we seeing working? Like, I think you've talked there about Facebook with the challenges, an approach that does work, the challenges of iOS 14, but other channels, other techniques, things that you're seeing.
Within Google Ads, I'm a massive fan of PMax campaigns and previously Smart Shopping campaigns. So Max have obviously taken over from Smart Shopping campaigns. I used to use Google Ads when it was Google AdWords.
Me too. We won't tell anyone.
So it's sort of text ads, right? It's like everything's like search sort of like text ads, and then there's these other ones you sort of like try them. And every time in e-commerce businesses, when I try these search ads or take over an account, I'll let them sort of like run, but they just underperform the shopping campaign. Shopping campaigns are great, and it just becomes about formatting, or it becomes about getting the feed right. So it's again, I kind of going with this scout mindset of going, okay, I'm not going to do best practice and apply what has worked for all these other businesses. I'm going to look at what's working, try pulling the sort of like different levers. Every time I pull that search campaign sort of like lever, nothing. And they're a pain in the ass to maintain. Whereas if you've got a big catalog of products, so let's say anything over 200 products, 300 products, the Smart Shopping campaigns work really, really well. If you want to really control what your ads are being shown for, if you're very protective and you don't want to advertise on your brand, then you just go for the regular shopping campaigns, because you can exclude sort of like bits and pieces. I've also seen, this is for a client that sells in the US, the discovery ads.
Can we maybe unpack that for listeners?
So, there's this amazing feature within Google. So if you get the Google app, you've got the search bar at the top, and then underneath there's a feed of articles that are related to things that you've searched for that you're interested in. So I kind of got onto it because I sort of wanted to get off the old Facebook sort of like scrolling, but wanted something kind of like interesting. And it's amazing the articles that it unearths. So anything that you've searched for comes up that is related to it you wouldn't necessarily search for. So anticipating things that you would then want. You can run ads within here. And they just went absolute gangbusters. It was like Facebook ads before. it was. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Then started trying doing Australia, and it didn't work as well.
Is that just because there's not the penetration of that app in Australia?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's tried them in the UK. They kind of went sort of like okay, but not sort of like great. But I mean, Performance Max includes those as well. Yeah, so actually the setup within Google is super simple. It's basically shopping campaigns of so smart for if you've got a big range, and then standard if not. And when I say smart, that now has become Performance Max.
PMax, yeah.
And I think the really key thing I learned as well is in PMax, you've obviously got all these audience signals that you can put in, but for e-commerce, it's mainly taking the information from the product feed. So it's having a really good product feed, which kind of brings me to the other thing that just works really well is the really boring, dull stuff, the stuff that nobody ever wants to do. Good photography, good unique descriptions, good reviews of good products. It's not any more complicated than that. I remember once working at the agency where we met, and an incredibly large retailer who everybody listening to this has bought something from paid us an obscene amount of money to write 10,000 descriptions. We bothered to write them themselves because it's hard. What we did was we just hired a couple of writers, gave them targets to work towards, and then smashed out a load of reviews. Not reviews, sorry, description.
Freudian slip there.
and you're away, right? It's everybody kind of comes at going, oh my god, we're not getting enough followers on TikTok and stuff like that. You're like, just get back to the basics.
But don't you reckon that applies so broadly to so much of digital? Like it's kind of all the sexy stuff that sits on the edge and gets clickbait and gets clicks and downloads and gets people interested, but then everything you just described is awesome for user experience. It's awesome for helping your paid campaigns work, but it's also awesome for your organic and awesome for your CRO. Like it's just
exactly. It's really simple though, right?
We could have been recording this 15 years ago, and those are the things you would have been saying.
Exactly, and I've been around the block so many times where it's sort of like, oh, okay, we've got to go try this, we've got to go try this, and you can step away from it for a while and then come back, and it's fundamentally it's all the same because we're still dealing with the same human beings, right? That are actually buying something. And I think in our industry it can be very bad for an echo chamber. I think all these things get repeated so much because it's hard to fundamentally understand these things. You've got to pull all these levers to see what works and what doesn't work, basically.
So I reckon that really the overview there of the Google ad environment is very much what we see as well. I think that's kind of validating, at least for me, to know that kind of what we see at Rocket is kind of what you're seeing in terms of shopping campaigns, PMax, search campaigns are really hard to get working in e-com. What other levers are we seeing here? What other channels? Other tech?
Email is just a total no-brainer. The core ones that I'll always focus on are Google Ads, Meta, Facebook Ads. I don't know what to call them anymore. Email, like just start to get them sort of started, and then move on to SEO once you start getting those results. Because it still cracks me up. People are like, "Oh, does email actually work?" Yes. Absolutely. It's like if you're not doing it, it is the biggest no-brainer. Again, it's all how you do it. And the best advice I could give to anybody here that is not that into email at the moment is start off with flows. So sequences of emails. If you start getting really good results from those, then move on to doing campaigns as in like broader sense.
Flows being to people that have bought, and then what happens from
anybody that's initiated some type of interest. So they might sign up for I mean, all these people do discount codes sort of like straight away. I feel that's a good way to get renewed profit. But let's say they've signed up to a discount code. It's like having a sequence of emails that's going, hey, here's the discount code. What type of products you're interested in, through different flows. So they're getting emails at specific times rather than it just getting all sort of like blasted.
Batch and blast. Yeah.
A couple of key metrics there you want to be looking for. If you're not getting an open rate of at least 20%, even with all this fun with like Apple tracking and all that sort of business, then you probably want to segment a little bit better.
Excellent. That's great feedback.
Be a little bit higher up there. Really, sort of like 25-30% type thing. With all this Apple stuff, you're probably better also tracking like the click-through rate rather than the actual open rate, because it's not as ideal. I know we're probably going to talk about sort of like SEP later on, but if you can connect Klaviyo, fantastic platform, really, really good, really straightforward and simple, to Facebook, and you can now connect it to Google as well. It will pass through your customer informations in the email and then match it to their audiences, because we can't rely on the pixel data anymore. Total no-brainer. Absolutely. Nice. That one.
With email, what I guess shares can you make around frequency? Like, how do you know you could be sending more emails? Or conversely, what are the signs that you're sending too many emails to the same prospect?
I mean, the sign that you're sending too many is they're not opening them or they're not clicking through on them. As far as frequency goes, when you've got something to say, don't fall into the trap of, hey, we've got to send an email each week or sort of like once a month and then just scramble to find something. You're better to say less, but say something more important. So,
awesome new product.
It's kind of like, remember all that old advice that used to go around where, you have to post on Facebook 3 times a day. I'm like, where does that come from? That's like I'm a screw company, right? Am I going to post about 3 times and you just see these terrible posts and stuff like that? So it's really dependent on the individual business when you've got something to say, because when you send that first email, most people open it and it needs to have value within it. So then they're likely to open the second one. You've got to give them some value. Again, it's all the fundamentals, right? It's exactly the same across anything. It's the best advice that I could give to people listening to this is don't get caught up in all the hype that you see. If it doesn't make sense to you, like the attribution thing, question it and do it better.
What about new channels? Like, not necessarily that new, but like kind of TikTok. What are we playing there? Are we seeing any things work there?
I'm tickling around the edges, but for any of the brands that I work with, they're not so kind of youth focused. The traffic was always very fickle. So you're talking like super high bounce rates, low time on site type thing. I know people that do really well at it. The brands that I work with, it's not their audience yet, but I definitely, to be honest, looking for a good opportunity to try it, basically.
And that's it. I think that it's probably good to hear that you are hearing through the grapevine that there are e-commerce businesses generating real world returns from it.
To be honest, I really want to go in and pull it apart and go, hey, well, let's do like a significant test for a month or 2 and let's see if the money in, money out actually adds up, or is it just hype? Because you see so much hype, right? It's actually, I want to go pull that lever for a business that I know sort of like really, really well. I think the challenge is getting the creative. There's definitely ways sort of like around it. So there's a business we're about to start doing with it a bit more seriously, but it's taken a while to get the creative. I do a little bit for the brands that I own, but it's really not the demographic, because the demographics are quite a bit older.
And that's changing. Like, it's definitely the same path as Facebook, right? But we saw, which is it starts young and then it starts to get, the demographic starts to skew higher. But we definitely see, that's why I'm curious as well, where that it's seen at the moment as being a channel with tremendous reach, cheap CPMs, cheap traffic. But I'd like to see that actually materialize into revenue, right?
Exactly. That's it. And it's every time I've used it, it's I know they're constantly improving, but it's pretty basic as well. It's sort of like the targeting, certainly when you're used to all the targeting that you can do on Facebook. And you bring up a good point. It's almost like generations, right? And I know e-com business owner pointed this out to me. He said, it's almost like Facebook is this certain age, Instagram's a certain age, and you think about that makes sense, right? Because you have all of your your friends and etc. on one, and everybody kind of groups around it. I'm 42 in like a week's time. I completely missed the Snapchat thing.
Yeah.
The agency I worked at, all the guys working there were all sort of like on it. I was like, I really need to kind of understand it. It just made no sense to me. I'm just like, I need to understand this, but it's just not, I don't.
You'll be on TikTok any minute now, I reckon, Iain.
Oh, no. I mean, I've got it and I sort of like, I'll kind of like look through it, but certainly for the trials I've done for clients, nothing yet that I want to put my money behind.
I reckon that makes sense. What about mobile desktop? What are like issues there? What are we seeing? Trends?
Just the usual. It's just going bonkers on mobile. Basically, that continue, right? It's definitely. I always see the conversion rates higher on desktop rather than mobile. That's fairly consistent, which makes sense, right? Because when you're on a mobile, we're sat there on our sofa, right, watching Netflix, and on our mobile, we're probably a lot more passive rather than if we're sat down at a computer working. We're here to get something done, which presents a challenge because you're trying to get people to go from mobile to desktop. I've never managed to do it successfully with any significantly sort of like good results. But overall conversion rates are going up, definitely.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. What about reviews? Can we just talk about that? You've touched on it. It'd be good to go a bit deeper.
I actually felt I was really late to the party on reviews. It's sort of it was one of those things that I always knew, and you would do a little bit of it. But whereas for me now it's fundamental, particularly within e-commerce. I'm a massive fan of Akendo. I think they do an absolutely fantastic job. They actually pull the reviews onto the page in proper HTML so it can be read by search engines and crawled by search engines, which is awesome. And honestly, I couldn't do without them now because there's such good feedback on the actual product, because these things come through so unbiased. You know if you've got a problem with a batch of products because people will be telling you about it. Absolutely key.
And maybe just unpack, so Akendo, where are they pulling reviews from?
So they request them. So what happens is it integrates with Shopify. Somebody purchases on Shopify, and then you can set the review to go, or the request for a review within X amount of days. So you allow for your delivery time, because obviously you don't want to send that before the product gets to them. That will really annoy them. So you kind of build in a little bit of buffer, because in Australia, we're a big old place, so it can take ages to get something over to WA or to Northern Territory or what have you. So you go, right, let's say 5 days after the order has been placed and we're confident we've got it to them in 2 or 3 days, sends out a request going, what did you think of the product? Out of 5 stars, they can click that and then they can write a more detailed review. The beauty is you can actually integrate Akendo with Klaviyo. So Klaviyo sends those emails, which then gives you a huge amount of control of when those emails are sent and when you then request them. They then show up on the actual site. You can filter through them and you can answer any questions that people have got or what have you. I tend to do reviews in 2 ways. So I'll have on-site reviews, so like Akendo, so it appears on the product page. So you're building there, but then also point them towards Google My Business. So what you can do is in Klaviyo, you can do it's like an A/B test, but it's just constantly going. So 50% of people get an email requesting an Akendo one, and 50% get a request for doing the Google one. So you've got to keep a close eye on those, and you've got to be with all of those businesses, right, that have, get the really sort of like dodgy reviews. I'm in a fortunate position where I'm working so closely with the owners that we can then address any of those issues. Fundamentally, absolutely an awesome way of doing it. It is challenging though for anybody that's got a huge range of SKUs that changes pretty regularly, because it's difficult to build them up. Whereas if you've got 10 or 20 products that you're selling throughout the year, you can
you're selling 20,000 SKUs, kind of product 15,000. Good luck building up.
You just tend to group them together, let's say within an individual brand, or anything that kind of makes sense where you can group them that way really sort of like helps. But absolutely. And it's it's just snowballs. It starts really, really slowly, builds and builds and builds and builds. I have no specific proof of this, but I am fairly confident it is a massive generator. It massively increases conversion rate if they're really sort of honest. And again, you can then take what people are saying about your brand and actually go, hey, this is what we're about. Because people are saying this is what they do. And you think about branding, there's always a brand promise. We are this. And then you deliver that. It's like, oh yeah, they're good. Rather than like over sort of like stretching. So for example, I work with the brands that is very price focused, but really good quality product. And we get it to people really, really quickly. So that's literally just what we use to advertise. And that's what comes back in all the reviews.
You get the social proof, right? It's just,
exactly. That's it. And so then it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, and you get more repeat customers. And
just such a flywheel, isn't it?
Oh, massively. Yeah, hugely. And I think the challenge is that as marketers, we're expected to get results really, really quickly, but there is the profitable results that people want take a long time. So what I tend to do is I do the stuff that I know will get a result really, really quickly, like Facebook ads or shopping ads or what have you. Once you've then built that confidence, you start to get it. You go, okay, cool, let's do some email marketing. Let's focus on SEO because this is going to take a lot longer sort of like to fix. We're not going to see those results sort of like for a longer time. And then you can trial these other things like Pinterest ads or TikTok because you've got a little bit more sort of like leeway. So if your boss is saying, hey, there's a certain budget, or your client saying, hey, we need to get this within a certain time, it's a good process. But
that's it. And you do kind of, I remember being at a conference years ago and really senior Google rep was there. I think kind of heading up something out of Singapore, kind of put a question out around which e-com business can afford to spend the most per click in the Google Ads interface. And everyone was kind of throwing around all these different answers, whatever else. And the answer was the business that can extract maximum lifetime value out of that click. Be the ability, which is kind of the Amazon model, right? Where the revenue that Amazon generates out of a new customer compared to if you're, mum and dad in the corner selling shoes, there's just not a fair fight. But I think in terms of how that works into marketing in an e-commerce instance is you've kind of got this positive flywheel, right? And it is about you're kind of those secondary channels, whether it's Pinterest or TikTok or whatever it might be, is going to work a hell of a lot better for you if you've got a website that has been proven to convert better and your pricing is more competitive and you've got this ecosystem, you've got email marketing that you can start dropping into the mix, and it all just creates an unfair advantage, doesn't it, over time?
Exactly. And the trick is finding the right combination for your business. And I think everybody wants to go, oh, should we do this or should we do this? Again, it's back to pulling those levers. And what I've consistently seen is that it's what's the percentage of, say, Google Ads to SEO to email to direct to even sort of like referral is different for each business. It's finding that optimum level that matches the business requirements. When I mean business requirements, is it just pure top line growth so they don't care about profit, or is it more profit and being cash flow? There's that trick, and then that comes down to a percentage of ad spend. I know you guys did a podcast on sort of like percentage of ad spend. I think that is such a key metric of what somebody needs to work within, is knowing what is profitable or what is going to get them the growth without putting them under of what that spend is.
Which I think is a really good takeaway for listeners to the pod, which is if you're sitting in the marketing function of an e-commerce business or a business where e-com is a part of your responsibility, you can't just keep your mind in the marketing box. You have to be moving up to, it's a business discussion. It's broader than just marketing, because stock and inventory and pricing and all those things have a massive impact on what you can be doing.
Worst thing you could say to an e-commerce business owner is, oh, we just need more of these products. It's like, okay, that was a decision we were making 2 months ago. So where were you then? That's nice that they're kind of like selling. It's actually understanding the individual products. What products generate them more profit? So a really key metric is gross margin. So gross margin is the money left over as a percentage after you've paid for the product and any other costs that go up or down the more you sell a product. For example, let's say selling fees. So Afterpay will charge you pretty much 6%. The more you sell, the more that goes into your cost. The freight from your manufacturers to your warehouse, can be a very significant cost as well. It's understanding that gross margin. So there's a really good basic formula for an e-commerce business that is, let's say the revenue coming in, take off your GST, because that's not our money, that's the government's money. 10% comes off that. 50% would be your gross margin. That's how much money is left over. So let's say you've made $100 sale. By the time they've paid for all their product and stuff like that, you've got 50% less. You then, to run your business, probably around about 30% for operating expenses, rent, salary,
warehouse.
All these sort of like other bits and pieces, which would then, and advertising. Right? And then that would leave you with 20% net profit. It's very hard to get those ratios, but it's a rough ball. If you're spending 30% of the revenue that has been made on advertising, that pretty much wipes out all of their profit. So there's no point in just constantly turning it up because you're going to kill it, right? So they're not carry on as a client. It's understanding what those numbers are for that business and then working with them to go, right, these are our budgets. This is what we're working towards. We'll get the most for this. If it's working, we'll turn it up. If it's not working, let's turn it down.
That's great. That's really, really good. I wanted to dig into technology and software. I reckon if I can push the friendship, we should do another pod at some point in the next couple of months, because I don't want to push through it and not do it well, but I think it is something I want to dig into because I think it is of interest to listeners.
I could also do it in 30 seconds. It's dead straightforward.
Well, if that's the case, it'd be a pretty poor podcast if it's a 30-second pod. Give it to me. Give me tech product stack. What's good, what's not? What should you be looking out for if you're
Let me put it this way. This is what I do for my e-commerce business, and this for me is the perfect setup. Is Shopify, total no-brainer. Unless you've got a really, really good developer and you might go, I know, Magento or Woo, but basically Shopify nailed it. Done. Klaviyo for email because it integrates beautifully with Shopify. It passes all the information back and forth. Reviews, Akendo. No-brainer. Again, integration with those other two sort of like platforms works really, really well. What else would you need? The inventory management, tricky. I've never found a really, really good one. It depends on your size. Basically keep things simple as possible. What else? What else would we cover tech-wise?
We're buying media within Google, within Facebook.
Oh so Google Ads, Meta.
Use Rocket for your SEO.
Rocket for your SEO. No, seriously though, I think they're getting somebody who really knows what they're doing within SEO is worth its absolute weight in gold. The automated reports that come out are kind of sort of like useful, but there's so many nuances, and somebody really good can just go, bang, that's the problem there. We need to fix that. Don't go cheap on it. You'll regret it.
That's it. Mate, that's been excellent. You've delivered on the promise of the pod and more. I always finish up with the final question. So what's that one piece of marketing advice that you'd give to an Australian marketer about e-commerce?
Keep it simple.
Love that.
Don't go... just don't overcomplicate this. And the things that we discussed fundamentally work the majority of the time. That's
good. That's good. Where can we find you? Where can listeners find you if they want to stay in contact?
I am super active on LinkedIn. I'm on there every day. I bought an e-commerce business. I basically share how to do it and all the insights, all the metrics of what I'm sort of like working with, the good months, the bad months, what I'm doing, what worked well, what's not. I also share unprovoked e-commerce tips, which is basically me writing down the stuff that I'm working out or have worked out and just want to share with people, share with the good people of Australia, because we're good.
Yeah, and I can definitely vouch for that. We're connected on LinkedIn, and I think it is, if you're interested in e-commerce, definitely follow Iain. He is posting, basically a what's and all journey, right, of what's happening to the business you're running. So, and I think the fact that it is, I guess, anonymous in terms of the business itself means that we are getting, it gives you an ability to share information that you otherwise wouldn't.
Exactly.
Which is awesome.
That's the beauty about not telling people who it is. And literally this.
could be anything. Iain, thanks so much for your time. I've definitely learnt some stuff myself, which I always think is the hallmark of a good pod. So thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can get you on again.
My pleasure. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Matt.